A gust of wind swept through the silent, opulent neighborhood, rattling the golden leaves that clung stubbornly to the branches. The Holloway estate stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, grand and imposing, a monument to wealth and perfection. Claire Madison, investigative journalist, pulled her coat tighter around her as she approached the mansion's perimeter. In her hands, she clutched a crumpled, yellowed envelope. The ink smudged, the handwriting hurried yet deliberate. "If you want the truth about the Holloways, look inside the garden." The letter had arrived that morning, slipped under the door of her office. No return address, no signature. Just those ominous words. Claire had spent years unraveling polished lies and concealed horrors, but something about this felt different. The Holloways weren't just wealthy, they were untouchable. And yet, someone wanted their secret unearthed. Her breath came in short bursts as she stepped onto the Holloways' lawn. The town adored this family. They hosted charity galas, funded scholarships, and sat in the front row at church every Sunday. Claire had interviewed Ethan Holloway once. His handshake had been firm, his smile practiced. She didn't believe in perfection. Tonight, she would prove why. The gardens stretched behind the estate, silent, serene, deceptive. Claire's boots sank slightly into the damp earth as she stepped onto the pathway. She had studied crime scenes enough to recognize an unnatural disturbance in the soil. Near the rose bushes, a patch of dirt looked uneven. A cold knot formed in her stomach. She retrieved a small spade from her bag, hands steady but heart pounding. The deeper she dug, the more resistance she met, until the blade struck something solid. Wood. A buried chest, half rotted, its hinges rusted with time. Claire swallowed, adrenaline flooding her veins. With careful precision, she pried the lid open. Her breath hitched. Inside lay a stack of blood-stained letters, a tarnished revolver, and a tiny, delicate bracelet engraved with a name: James Holloway, the missing child. The town had mourned his disappearance 20 years ago. The Holloways had given heartfelt speeches, led candlelit vigils, even donated a fortune to missing children's charities. But they had never found his body. Now, Claire understood why. A wave of nausea rolled through her as she lifted one of the letters. The ink had bled over time, but the words were still visible. He saw something he shouldn't have. There was no choice. Her fingers trembled. This wasn't just a crime. This was a cover-up. The crisp autumn air suddenly felt suffocating. Claire's mind raced. Someone had gone through the trouble of burying this. Someone who thought time had erased the truth. But time hadn't, and neither would she. Claire clenched the bracelet in her palm, staring at the mansion that loomed in the darkness. Somewhere inside, the Holloways slept, oblivious to the fact that their past had just been exhumed. She pulled out her phone, snapping a quick photo of the chest's contents. This was only the beginning. Claire sat at her desk staring at the evidence she had unearthed. The Holloways had built their reputation on wealth, influence, and philanthropy. But the chest she had found in their garden suggested something much darker lurked beneath the surface. She ran her fingers over the child-sized bracelet engraved with James Holloway. The name alone was enough to send a shiver down her spine. James, the boy who vanished without a trace 20 years ago. On the surface, Ethan and Margaret Holloway embodied class and generosity. Ethan, a sharp-witted businessman, had turned a struggling real estate firm into a multi-million-dollar empire. Margaret, always poised and elegant, ran charities and hosted lavish fundraisers, ensuring their family's name remained synonymous with prestige. Their children were expected to uphold that same image. Nathan Holloway, now in his mid-30s, had followed in his father's footsteps. A calculated lawyer with ambitions far beyond corporate law, he commanded attention whenever he entered a room. His speeches about justice and reform had earned him a growing political following. But Claire had seen his type before. Polished, dangerous, controlled. Then there was Lena Holloway. At 28, she was the enigma of the family. Fragile, reclusive, and always on the fringes of society, She rarely attended public events. Unlike her brother, she shunned attention. Claire had found almost nothing about her in public records, as if she had been erased. Despite the family's influence, Claire knew that money couldn't silence everything. James Holloway had been 5 years old when he vanished. The town had grieved. His face had been plastered across missing child posters, and news anchors had pleaded for information. The Holloways stood before cameras, weeping, offering rewards, leading candlelit vigils. They played the role of devastated parents so well, no one questioned their pain. The police had searched the home. Briefly, and then, inexplicably, the investigation stalled. Claire leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers against the desk. Why had the Holloways blocked a full police search? That wasn't something grieving parents did. That was something people hiding a crime did. She pulled out the stack of blood-stained letters she had recovered. The ink was faded, but the words were legible enough. She skimmed through the first. No one can ever know what happened that night. Her pulse quickened. There it was, proof that someone had been hiding the truth. She reached for her phone and scrolled through her contact list until she found the name she needed. Retired Detective Richard Lawson, the man who had investigated James Holloway's disappearance before the case had mysteriously gone cold. She hit call. A gruff voice answered. "Madison, it's been a while." Claire didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need to talk about James Holloway." A long pause. Then, a sigh. "You don't want to dig up those graves, kid." Claire glanced at the child's bracelet still clutched in her palm. Too late. The call with Lawson was only the beginning. As Claire prepared to meet with the former detective, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was already watching her. Claire pressed the phone tighter against her ear, waiting for the retired detective's response. Richard Lawson had worked the Holloway case before it was abruptly shut down. His silence on the other end of the line was unsettling. "Lawson?" she pushed. A deep sigh, then his voice laced with caution. "You don't want to do this, Madison. That family, they don't play fair." Claire's grip tightened. "I already found something, Detective. A chest. Blood-stained letters. A child's bracelet with James Holloway's name on it." Silence. Then, a low curse. "You shouldn't have gone digging." "But I did, and I'm not stopping." Lawson exhaled sharply. "Meet me at St. Augustine Cemetery in an hour. No calls, no texts. If the Holloways find out you're asking questions, you won't get answers. You'll get buried." An hour later, Claire stood among rows of weathered headstones as Lawson approached. His face, lined with years of regret, gave away the weight of what he was about to say. "The Holloways shut down that investigation before we even got close," he admitted. "They threw money at everyone, judges, reporters, even a few officers. Hell, they even got to my captain." Claire folded her arms. "Why? Why cover up their own son's disappearance?" Lawson hesitated. Then, in a hushed voice, he said, "Because James didn't disappear. That's just the story they told the world." She felt the weight of his words settle in her stomach. "Then what really happened?" His jaw tensed. "We found Lena the next morning, in the attic. She wasn't speaking, wasn't moving, like something inside her had snapped. I pushed for a psych eval. A few days later, the Holloways sent her away, told the press she was traumatized by her brother's abduction. But I knew better. That girl saw something." Claire's mind raced. Lena was the key. She turned to leave, but Lawson's voice stopped her. "Madison." She looked back. "Be careful. You're walking into something that could get you killed." She didn't respond. Instead, she headed for her car, dialing a number she never thought she'd use, a psychiatric retreat outside the city. "I need to speak with Lena Holloway." The Reynolds psychiatric retreat stood isolated behind iron gates, its pristine exterior masking the lives unraveling within its walls. Claire sat across from Lena Holloway in a small, dimly lit visitation room. The woman before her was frail, her hands trembling slightly as she toyed with the hem of her sleeve. Her eyes, sunken, haunted, avoided Claire's. For a moment, neither spoke. Then softly, Lena whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Claire leaned forward. "I need to know what happened to James." At the mention of his name, Lena's breath hitched. Her hands went still. Claire waited. Finally, in a voice so fragile it barely carried, Lena said, "James didn't disappear." Claire felt her pulse quicken. "Then where is he?" A pause. Then Lena lifted her gaze, and Claire saw the devastation trapped inside her. "Nathan killed him." The words felt like a gunshot. Claire fought to keep her composure. "Lena, tell me everything." Tears welled in Lena's eyes, but her voice remained eerily calm. He saw something. Something he wasn't supposed to see." Nathan panicked, and then James was gone. Claire's throat went dry. "Your parents covered for him, didn't they?" Lena let out a shuddered breath. "They always do?" A long silence stretched between them before Lena whispered, "I hear him sometimes, when I sleep." Claire swallowed the lump in her throat. "Lena, I need proof. Anything." Lena hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She slid a crumpled piece of paper across the table. Claire unfolded it. A child's drawing, a little boy, a bed, a man standing in the doorway. The name scribbled at the bottom sent chills down her spine. James. Claire returned to her apartment, heart pounding as she pieced together the fragments of truth. James had seen something. But what? She dumped the contents of the chest onto her desk, sifting through the letters. Her fingers trembled as she found one that stood out. Dated the night before James vanished. She read the words carefully. "I saw Daddy kissing someone else. It wasn't Mommy." Claire's breath caught. Ethan Holloway had been having an affair. James must have walked in on something he wasn't supposed to see. Then, another letter. This one shook her to the core. He said he would tell. I couldn't let him. I had to make him stop. Claire's fingers clenched around the paper. This wasn't a confession from Ethan. This was from Nathan. The truth settled in her chest like lead. Nathan had suffocated James, a child panicking, silencing his little brother in a moment of desperation. And the Holloways? They had cleaned it up like they would any inconvenience, buried the body, fabricated a kidnapping, and played the grieving parents to perfection. Claire shut her eyes, bile rising in her throat. This was never a case of a missing child. This was murder. She barely heard her phone vibrate until the sound pierced through the ringing in her ears. She grabbed it. A new message. No sender ID. "Stop digging, Claire." A cold chill crept down her spine. She wasn't just close to the truth. Someone knew she had found it. Claire's hands trembled as she locked her apartment door. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a warning. And she wasn't sure if she had just uncovered the Holloway's secret, or if she had just made herself their next target. The article went live at midnight. Claire sat motionless, watching the words, "Cracks in the Holloway Legacy, the unsolved case of James Holloway," flash across her screen. There was no turning back now. She had laid out the inconsistencies, the sudden halt in the investigation, the police files that had vanished, the psychiatric commitment of Lena Holloway, and the suspicious power the family held over law enforcement. She hadn't named Nathan directly. Not yet. But the implication was clear. Her phone vibrated. A private number. She hesitated before answering. A slow exhale on the other end. Then, Nathan's voice, smooth yet cold. "That was a mistake, Claire." She swallowed, keeping her voice steady. "People deserve the truth." A quiet chuckle, almost amused. "You think you're the first to try? Do you know how many people have disappeared for digging too deep?" Claire didn't respond. "Tell me, Claire," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Do you ever wonder what it's like to vanish? One moment, you exist. The next, you're just gone." Her fingers clenched around her phone. "Is that what happened to James?" she shot back. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "You're playing a dangerous game. Walk away before you regret it." The line went dead. Claire closed her eyes, heart hammering. She had rattled him, and that meant she was close. She exhaled shakily and picked up her notebook. Lena was the key, and it was time to set her free. The psychiatric retreat was dimly lit when Claire arrived. Lena sat in the same spot as before, knees tucked under her. This time, though, her eyes didn't dart around the room. She didn't flinch when Claire sat across from her. She was ready. Claire placed a recorder between them. "Nathan called me." Lena's lips parted slightly. "He's scared." Claire nodded. "You hold the one thing that can destroy him, the truth." Lena's fingers toyed with the sleeve of her sweater, but her expression remained unreadable. "You're going to testify, Lena. You're going to tell the world what happened." A long pause. Then, for the first time, Lena met Claire's gaze. "Yes." The single word shattered decades of silence. The Holloway Foundation Gala was the kind of event where power danced behind crystal glasses and velvet smiles, a sanctuary for the wealthy, the untouchable. Nathan stood on the grand stage, addressing the guests. His tailored suit fit the role of a man in control, but Claire saw it now, the strain beneath his facade. She waited until the last round of applause died down. Then, with deliberate steps, she made her way to the microphone. Nathan's eyes locked onto hers. "Miss Madison," he greeted smoothly. "I wasn't aware you were invited." She gave him a polite, empty smile. "I invite myself when it comes to the truth." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Nathan kept his charming exterior intact. "Is there something you'd like to share?" Claire didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'd like to talk about James Holloway." The crowd stilled. Nathan's jaw tightened. "We've been over this before. My family has suffered enough." Claire's voice was calm but sharp. "Yes, I imagine covering up a murder is exhausting." Gasps erupted. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Nathan's mask cracked, if only for a second. Claire turned toward the audience. "James Holloway didn't disappear. He was murdered." A murmur of shock ran through the crowd. The weight of her words settled like a storm cloud. Nathan's grip on the podium tightened. "You're making baseless accusations." Claire's lips curled into a small smile. "Am I?" The doors at the back of the room opened, and Lena Holloway stepped inside. The room froze. Dressed in a simple black dress, she looked ethereal and fragile, but her eyes burned with something new. Resolve. Nathan's composure finally broke. "Lena," he whispered, voice barely audible. "You shouldn't be here." Lena stepped forward, voice steady. "No, Nathan, I should have been here years ago." The cameras flashed. Reporters surged closer. Lena turned toward the audience. "My brother didn't vanish." Her voice wavered, but didn't falter. "Nathan killed him, and my parents helped cover it up." Pandemonium erupted. Nathan's breath hitched. Then, in a blur of movement, he lunged at Claire. The impact knocked the microphone stand over. Reporters screamed. Cameras flashed in bursts of white. Claire hit the ground hard. Nathan's hands clamped around her throat. "You should have let it go," he hissed, his grip tightening. "Now, you're next." Before she could react, security tackled him to the ground. He thrashed, cursed, struggled, but the carefully curated mask of Nathan Holloway was gone. All that remained was the monster beneath. The Holloways fell overnight. Nathan was arrested. His parents fled the country, their empire collapsing under the weight of scandal. Lena, though emotionally wrecked, was finally free. Claire watched as her article dominated headlines. For years, the Holloways had controlled the truth. Now, the world knew what they really were. As Claire sat in her office, staring at the headlines, she felt it. Relief, but also a question lingering in the back of her mind. If they had hidden one crime so well, what else had they buried? Nathan's face was plastered across every major news outlet. Nathan Holloway arrested, the family's darkest secret exposed. Footage from the gala showed his wild, frenzied attack on Claire, his once polished image shattered beyond repair. Reporters dissected every piece of his past, his childhood, his legal career, his hidden temper. But the story didn't end with him. Margaret and Ethan Holloway had vanished overnight. By the time authorities issued a warrant for their arrest, their private jet had already crossed international waters. Claire sat in her office, scanning the headlines, her stomach twisting. They had known. They had watched their son murder a child, orchestrated a cover-up, and played the role of grieving parents while the world pitied them. And when the truth finally came knocking, they ran. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "You should have let it go, Madison." The voice was male, unfamiliar, measured. She stiffened. "Who is this?" A low chuckle. "It doesn't matter. But it's not over. People like the Holloways, they always land on their feet." The line went dead. A chill crawled up her spine. They might have fled, but the game wasn't over. Lena stood by the window of her small apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The psychiatric retreat had been her prison for years, but now she was free. Claire knocked softly at the door. Lena turned, her expression unreadable. "They're gone, aren't they?" Claire nodded. "For now." Lena exhaled. "Good." She walked to the kitchen, pouring 2 cups of tea. Her movements were slower, steadier, no longer weighted by the ghosts of her past. Claire took a seat, studying her. "How does it feel?" Lena stared at the steam curling from her cup. "Strange. I spent my life being told what to say, what to think. And now, it's quiet." Claire hesitated. "You know, you saved lives by speaking out." Lena's lips curved slightly, though sadness lingered in her gaze. "I didn't do it to save anyone else. I did it to save myself." Claire understood. For the first time in 20 years, Lena Holloway was finally living for herself. The city had hailed Claire as a fearless journalist. Her name graced the covers of magazines, interview requests flooded her inbox, and networks clamored for exclusive rights to her story. But the truth wasn't glamorous. It was exhausting. She sat alone in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the window. Tired eyes, restless mind. She had fought for justice, but at what cost? Her phone buzzed again. This time, a familiar name. "Lawson." She answered. "You did it, Madison?" His voice was rough, but there was something else beneath it. Pride? Relief? She sighed. "Did I?" The Holloways got away. A pause. "For now." She rubbed her temples. "And if they come back?" Lawson chuckled. "Then I hope you're still around to take them down." A smirk tugged at her lips. "I will be." She ended the call, leaning back in her chair. She had exposed one of the most powerful families in the country. But there were more out there. Families built on secrets, money protecting monsters. She wasn't done. Not yet. Somewhere in a foreign country, Margaret and Ethan Holloway sat in a private estate, sipping expensive wine, watching the chaos unfold from a distance. They weren't mourning their legacy. They were waiting. Claire knew one thing for certain. The truth had been exposed. But the danger was far from over, and when the Holloways resurfaced, because they would, she'd be ready. Claire sat at her desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, staring at the blank document on her screen. The cursor blinked in steady defiance, as if daring her to put the final words to a story that had consumed her life. She inhaled sharply, then exhaled, steadying herself. Her fingers moved, each keystroke carrying the weight of everything she had uncovered. What if they had told the truth? Would James still be alive? She paused, reading the sentence again, letting it settle in her mind. Would he? If Ethan and Margaret Holloway had not been obsessed with preserving their name, their wealth, their legacy, would their youngest son still be here? If Nathan had confessed instead of silencing an innocent child, would his life have turned out differently? If Lena had not been forced into a life of silence and guilt, would she have grown up free instead of imprisoned in her own mind? The truth, Claire knew, was that the Holloways had built their empire on secrets, manipulation, and a carefully controlled image. And the price of that deception had been a child's life. Her fingers tightened around her mug of coffee, now cold. The headlines had moved on, shifting to the next scandal, the next crime, the next downfall. but she couldn't move on. Because somewhere, on a beach in a foreign country, sipping cocktails behind the walls of a private estate, Margaret and Ethan Holloway were watching. Waiting. Nathan was in prison. But his parents? They had escaped. For now. She knew better than anyone that the powerful always found ways to slither back into the world, reinventing themselves, cloaking their sins in new disguises. A chill crept down her spine. Would they do it again? She finished typing, her final words settling like a stone in her chest. Lies can be buried, but the truth has a way of clawing itself free, and when it does, no one is untouchable. Claire clicked save, then shut her laptop. The Holloways had fallen. But in a world built on power and deception, she knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't be the last time she uncovered the truth, and when the next monster surfaced, she would be ready. Far away, beyond the reach of the law, Margaret Holloway placed her drink down on a glass table, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. She scrolled through Claire's article, eyes sharp. Then she turned to Ethan, speaking with unsettling calm. She thinks it's over. He didn't look up from his phone. Let her think that. A pause, then a slow smile. For now. The truth is not always convenient. It is not always kind. It does not bow to power, nor does it fade when ignored. The Holloways built their world on silence, on the lies they told, the secrets they buried, and the people they destroyed to keep their legacy intact. But silence does not erase guilt. It festers. It grows. It lingers in the minds of those who carry the burden of knowing. James Holloway never had a voice. His story was rewritten before it could ever be told. His life was reduced to a headline, a mystery, a memory that was meant to fade. But the truth found a way. It always does. And those who believe they are untouchable, the ones who manipulate, deceive, and walk away from their crimes unscathed, eventually learn a harsh reality. No matter how deep you bury the past, the dead do not stay silent forever.